The mail-order bride came expecting nothing, until a cowboy showed her the true meaning of love. Leaving her crowded home world behind, stepping onto a spaceship bound for the distant frontier of Praxis 9, she thought she was prepared for anything. Yet as she stared through the tiny viewport at the pale, red dust clouds of the colony planet, she realized she wasn't prepared for the silence. Praxis 9 was nothing like the bustling core world she had known. Here, the cities were small clusters of metal and glass, arranged in neat, functional patterns. Between them stretched endless plains, tinged with copper-colored grass that whispered in the wind. The sky, larger than any she had seen, was painted in layers of red and orange, fading into violet as it climbed. There were no advertisements shouting through the air, no artificial lights masking the stars, only the quiet hum of life, raw and natural. Alara took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. She had agreed to this mail-order marriage because she had no other choice, at least not one that offered safety and purpose. She had expected a partnership of convenience, a quiet life with someone who might tolerate her presence. Love, she had told herself, was a luxury she could not afford. The shuttle landed with a gentle thrum, and the doors opened onto a small landing platform. The air smelled faintly of metal and the warm, dry dust of the plains. She stepped out, dragging her small luggage behind her. A figure waited near the edge of the platform, leaning casually against a solar-powered utility vehicle. He was tall, with a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face, but his posture was relaxed, confident without arrogance. "Miss Voss." The voice was calm, deep, and carried an easy warmth. "Yes," Alara replied, her voice a little too tight. "Calder Reed," he said, straightening and extending a hand. His grip was firm but not forceful, reassuring rather than intimidating. "Welcome to Praxis 9. Alara hesitated before shaking his hand. There was something disarming about him. Maybe it was the simplicity of his smile, or the way his eyes seemed to see more than just her outward appearance. He wasn't like the men she had imagined when she signed the agreement. No ambition to control, no glint of profit in his gaze. He seemed human, real. The journey from the landing platform to Calder's homestead was quiet. Alara watched the landscape slide by, a mix of curiosity and apprehension stirring inside her. Herds of low-slung, bioengineered animals grazed in the distance, moving in calm, almost meditative patterns across the plains. Calder drove with ease, speaking occasionally about the land, the sky, and the way the colony thrived despite its isolation. "This land isn't easy," he said, glancing at her with a slight smile, "but it rewards patience. You learn to work with it, not against it. You'll see soon enough." Alara nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what he meant. Back on her home world, survival often meant following instructions, obeying systems, and bending under pressure. Here, it seemed survival required understanding. Understanding the land, understanding others, and perhaps most difficult of all, understanding oneself. The homestead came into view as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. It was modest, built from local materials and reinforced with simple technology. Solar panels glinted on the roof, and small wind turbines spun lazily in the gentle evening breeze. Around the house, cultivated plots of plants were arranged in neat rows, and the animals grazed nearby under the watchful eye of a few robotic helpers. Alara set down her bags and took in the scene. It was small, simple, but it felt alive. Calder followed her gaze, tilting his head toward the plains. "People think frontier life is lonely," he said. "It is. You just have to know how to listen." Alara wanted to ask what he meant, but she held her tongue. There would be time. Dinner was a quiet affair. Calder had prepared a simple meal from local produce and the day's harvested vegetables. They ate on the porch, watching as the twin suns cast long, golden shadows across the plains. "You must have had a long journey," Calder said, breaking the silence gently. "Yes," she admitted. Longer than I expected, perhaps. The shuttle, it's not like a Starliner. It's small, cramped, and, well, you learn a lot about yourself when you have nothing else to focus on. Calder chuckled softly. Space travel has a way of teaching humility. But it also makes you appreciate small things. A quiet meal, a warm breeze, or a sky so wide it feels like it could hold all your dreams. Elara's lips curved into a small smile, but she didn't speak. Dreams had always felt dangerous to her. They were fragile things, easy to lose, and she wasn't sure she could afford that risk. After dinner, Calder offered to show her the homestead. They walked along the edges of the property, where a small stream wound through the grass, feeding the crops and providing water for the animals. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and growing things, and Elara felt a quiet pull in her chest she hadn't felt in years. "This land, it changes how you see things," Calder said, almost to himself. "You work with it, care for it, and it cares for you in return. People forget that sometimes. They think survival is about taking, not giving." Elara looked at him, realizing for the first time that he wasn't just talking about the land. Perhaps he was talking about people too. She wanted to ask, but she hesitated, unsure if she could voice a question about feelings she had buried for so long. Night fell over Praxis 9 with a calm majesty. The stars stretched wide across the sky, sharper and brighter than any she had seen in the city. She stood on the porch, feeling the cool air on her skin, and wondered what it meant to belong somewhere. Not just to a person, but to a place, to a world that demanded effort, patience, and respect. Calder joined her, handing her a warm cup of tea. "It takes time," he said. "Time to understand, time to trust, and time to let things grow, including people." Elara looked at him, the words settling in a corner of her heart she had long ignored. Perhaps she had been wrong about this journey. Perhaps this was not just a contract. Perhaps there was a chance for something more. She did not speak, but she felt the shift inside her, a quiet opening, a small flicker of hope. The stars above seemed to stretch endlessly, and for the first time in her life she felt the possibility of being seen, truly seen, not as a tool or a convenience, but as a person. They stayed on the porch until the moons rose high, talking quietly about trivial things, the animals, the crops, the peculiarities of frontier life. Each word, each laugh, each shared silence drew them closer. There was no rush, no pressure, only the gentle rhythm of two people learning to exist in the same space. By the time they retired for the night, Elara's heart was lighter than it had been in years. She had expected nothing, no warmth, no friendship, no connection. Instead, she found herself in the presence of a man who understood the land, respected her, and somehow, without effort, made the vast frontier feel like home. As she lay in the small, simple room assigned to her, Elara stared at the ceiling, thinking about the days to come. Praxis 9 was not an easy place to live. It demanded patience, effort, and an openness she wasn't sure she could sustain. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of that challenge. Tomorrow, she would step out into the sun, meet the animals, and learn the rhythms of this land. She would try to understand the man who had welcomed her here, not as a stranger, but as someone with potential worth caring for. And slowly, quietly, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps she had not traveled across the stars in vain. For the first time in her life, Elara felt the smallest spark of something she had thought lost, the possibility of belonging and perhaps of love. The morning light spilled over the red plains of Praxis 9, casting long golden streaks across the grass-like fields. Elara woke to the soft hum of the wind turbines and the distant lowing of the herd animals. For a moment, she simply lay in bed, listening. The quiet was different from anything she had ever known. It was not empty, it was alive, full of small sounds that spoke of life and care. When she finally got up, she found Calder already outside, walking along the edge of the grazing land. He waved and she stepped out, brushing the sleep from her hair. "Morning," Calder said, his voice calm and welcoming. "You slept well." Yes, she replied, surprised by how natural it felt to say the word. She followed him as he moved toward the herd, his long strides confident but unhurried. You'll want to meet them, he said. They're a little shy at first, but they're smart. They respond to kindness more than anything else. Alara watched as he knelt beside one of the smaller creatures, extending a hand. The animal sniffed carefully, then nudged his palm with its nose. Calder smiled. See, you have to earn trust, not demand it. She mimicked him, reaching out cautiously. The creature stepped closer, then, after a small hesitation, allowed her to stroke its soft, copper-colored fur. She laughed softly. I didn't think I'd ever enjoy this. Calder's eyes twinkled. Most people don't at first. The frontier isn't like the cities. Out here, the world doesn't bend to your will. You bend to it or you fail. As they walked back toward the homestead, Calder explained how the colony survived. Humans had built small, efficient settlements, learning to live with the planet instead of against it. Water came from filtered streams, crops were grown in carefully maintained plots, and energy came from wind, sun, and small-scale generators. Technology existed, but it was subtle, designed to support life rather than replace it. Alara listened, fascinated. Back on her home world, people relied almost entirely on automated systems. Machines fed, cleaned, and controlled everything. Out here, life demanded presence, thought, and effort. Humans had to adapt and care, not just rely on convenience. By mid-morning, they were at the garden. Calder showed her the rows of vegetables and herbs, explaining the techniques used to maximize yield in the dry soil. He handed her a small tool. Here, try this. You don't need to rush, just pay attention. Alara knelt beside him, digging gently into the soil. It felt strange, almost foreign, to touch the earth with her bare hands, but there was also a sense of satisfaction in the simple effort. Every seed planted, every plant tended, felt like a small victory against the harshness of the land. You know, Calder said, glancing at her, people think the frontier is about toughness, about grit, but really it's about patience and respect. You have to understand the land, the animals, and each other. That's what makes it thrive. Alara nodded, taking his words to heart. She had spent so long believing survival meant using everything at your disposal, bending everything to your will. Here, survival meant care, attention, and cooperation. It was human ingenuity at its best, not machines, not domination, but thought, empathy, and action. When the work was done, Calder led her to a small clearing near the edge of the homestead. A few other settlers were gathered, exchanging news, sharing tools, and laughing. Alara felt a quiet warmth as she observed the community. Unlike her home world, where people were distant and transactional, this colony thrived on cooperation. Every person had a role and every action mattered. One of the settlers approached her with a gentle smile. You must be Alara, she said. I'm Mara. Calder's been talking about you. Alara smiled, feeling slightly shy. Yes, it's different here. Mara laughed softly. Different can be good, you'll see. People here value what humans do best. We don't rely on machines to solve everything. We rely on each other. The idea sank in slowly. For the first time in a long while, Alara felt she could be part of something. Not just surviving, but contributing. Not just existing, but helping to shape life with her own hands. Later, Calder took her to the edge of a small plateau overlooking the plains. The sun was high, and the landscape stretched endlessly, alive with color and movement. This is why I love it here, Calder said quietly. Out there, you can see what humans are capable of. Not because we're stronger than nature, but because we understand it. Because we adapt, care, and connect. That's our strength. Alara turned to him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. She had expected a quiet life, but here he was, showing her that human life could be meaningful in ways she had never imagined. As the day turned to evening, Calder invited her to help with feeding the herd. She hesitated at first, unsure of her abilities, but he guided her patiently, showing her the gentle techniques that calmed the animals. Slowly, she learned to read their movements, understand their needs, and respond with care. Each successful interaction brought a quiet pride that she hadn't felt in years. When the work was done, they returned to the homestead. Calder brewed tea while Alara washed her hands, the aroma of herbs and fresh water filling the small kitchen. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. "You're learning fast," Calder said, finally breaking the quiet. "I think I'm starting to understand," Alara replied. "It's not just about surviving. It's about living, paying attention, caring," Calder nodded. "Exactly. Humans built this colony with our hands and hearts. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And you'll be part of that soon if you choose." Alara felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of possibility she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. It was more than just admiration for Calder or the land. It was a recognition of what humans could do when they worked together, when they cared. She had expected nothing, but here everything felt full of meaning. That night, as they prepared for bed, Calder offered her a small, hand-carved charm. "For luck," he said simply, "or for courage, or maybe just to remind you that you belong here if you want to." Alara took it, feeling the smooth weight of it in her hand. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time she felt she could face it with someone by her side. Not because she had to, not because it was required, but because she wanted to. Sleep came easier than it had in months. The soft hum of the wind turbines and the distant calls of animals were no longer strange or lonely. They were comforting, reminders that she was part of a larger world, one built by human hands and human hearts. Over the next few days, Alara began to settle into the rhythms of the homestead. She learned how to mend fences, tend the crops, and care for the animals. Calder's guidance was patient and gentle, his pride in her efforts quiet but unmistakable. Slowly, she began to see herself not as an outsider or a temporary guest, but as someone who could contribute, someone whose presence mattered. One afternoon, while repairing a broken water line, Alara paused to look out over the plains. The sun was low, casting long shadows, and the wind carried the faint scent of dry earth and growing things. She thought about her life before Praxis 9, the crowded, impersonal city, the endless noise, the sense that she was just another face in a sea of faces. Here, everything was different. People valued effort, kindness, and connection. The land demanded care, but it rewarded it. And Calder, he had shown her a kind of patience and respect she had never known. She felt a quiet determination settle in her chest. She would learn, she would grow, and she would contribute. Praxis 9 was more than a new home. It was a place where she could finally belong. And perhaps, in time, she could learn to belong to someone too. That evening, as the twin moons rose over the plains, Alara and Calder sat together on the porch. They watched the stars reflect in each other's eyes, not speaking much, but feeling a connection that didn't require words. For the first time, Alara understood that life was more than survival. It was about connection, understanding, and the courage to open one's heart. She had arrived expecting nothing. But in the quiet of the frontier, she was beginning to see that she could have everything. The mornings on Praxis 9 had begun to feel familiar, almost comforting, to Alara. She woke to the soft hum of the wind turbines, the distant calls of the herd, and the endless sky stretching above the plains. Each day brought new tasks, new lessons, and new small victories. Yet beneath the routine, there was an undercurrent of doubt she could not ignore. Alara had told herself she was prepared for a life without love, without attachment. She had agreed to a mail-order marriage as a practical step, a chance to live somewhere safe, to have work, and perhaps to belong somewhere. But now, living alongside Calder, seeing the land and the people, she felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her. Something fragile, uncertain, and yet impossible to ignore. One morning, while helping Calder repair a section of the fence near the southern pasture, her thoughts wandered. She watched the copper-colored herd grazing peacefully, their slow, deliberate movements a mirror of the calm order of the colony. Calder worked with a quiet efficiency, hammering posts and adjusting wires with care, his movements deliberate and practiced. "You're thinking too much," Calder said suddenly, glancing at her with a faint smile. "That happens a lot at first." Ilara frowned slightly. "I'm not thinking," she said, though the words lacked conviction. Calder chuckled. "You are, I can see it. You've been carrying too much in your mind for too long. The frontier is good for clearing that out, but only if you let it." Ilara returned to her work, trying to focus on the fence, but the words lingered. Let it out. Let yourself feel. She had spent her life building walls, walls of practicality, walls of distance, walls to protect herself from disappointment. But Calder, with his quiet patience and gentle guidance, seemed to chip away at them slowly, without even trying. After the fence was repaired, Calder suggested they take a break. He led her to a small rise overlooking the plains. The twin suns hung low, painting the grass in shades of gold and amber. The wind carried a faint scent of wild herbs and warm earth. Ilara sat beside him, letting the silence stretch between them. It was comfortable, not awkward, and for a moment she allowed herself to simply watch the land. "You know," Calder said quietly, "I didn't order a bride because I needed one. I wanted someone to share this with, someone who could see the land the way I do. Someone who could work with it and with me, not just for me." Ilara's breath caught slightly. She had expected practicality, routine, perhaps even cold civility. But not this. Not the honesty in his words, the subtle vulnerability he offered. She looked away, focusing on the horizon, unsure of how to respond. The next few days brought small tests of her courage and patience. A sudden heat wave threatened the crops, requiring careful management of water and shade. The animals, normally calm, became restless. The settlers worked together to manage the challenges, and Ilara found herself moving alongside them, adjusting irrigation channels, guiding the herd to cooler pastures, and learning to anticipate their needs. Through it all, Calder was beside her, guiding without directing, encouraging without pressuring. He showed her that leadership and care were not about control, but understanding. It was a lesson in trust, not just trusting others, but trusting oneself. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ilara sat by the stream, letting the cool water run through her fingers. Calder joined her silently, and for a few moments they simply watched the reflection of the twin moons ripple across the surface. "You've changed," Calder said softly. Ilara blinked at him. Maybe." "You have," he insisted. "You came here expecting nothing. You're learning to care, to notice, to belong." She wanted to argue, to say that she was still the same person, cautious and distant. But she could not deny the truth. The frontier, the work, and Calder's presence had stirred something in her, a willingness to feel, to connect, to let go of some of her fear. But even as she acknowledged it, doubt crept in. She remembered her life on the core world, the years of loneliness and practicality. What if she was wrong about Calder? What if her heart led her to disappointment? She had been trained to expect nothing, and now she was afraid to hope. That night, as they returned to the homestead, Calder noticed her quiet mood. "Ilara," he said gently, "you're thinking too far ahead again. You're trying to protect yourself from a future that hasn't happened. You can't control everything." "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's just hard to let go." Calder placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but reassuring. "You don't have to let go all at once. Start small. Trust the land, trust the people, trust yourself. And maybe trust me too." Ilara looked at him, seeing the patience and sincerity in his eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. The following days brought more opportunities for connection. Ilara helped Mara and other settlers prepare for the colony's small harvest festival. They decorated communal spaces with colorful fabrics and simple lights, shared stories of life on Praxis 9, and cooked dishes from home recipes adapted for frontier ingredients. Calder remained close, guiding her gently, never demanding attention but always present. Alara felt the warmth of community and the satisfaction of shared effort. She realized that humans thrived not through domination or isolation, but through collaboration and care. It was a lesson in humility and pride, in patience and love, lessons she had never experienced in her previous life. During the festival, Calder asked her to join him in a quiet dance under the twin moons. The movement was simple, just swaying to the rhythm of shared laughter and conversation, but it felt intimate, grounding. Alara's walls, so carefully built over years of caution, began to crumble in the gentle embrace of the frontier night. "You're smiling," Calder whispered. "I am," she admitted, surprised by the truth of it. He nodded, his hand brushing hers. "That's good. You deserve to feel it." As the festival ended and the settlers returned to their homes, Alara lingered with Calder by the edge of the clearing. The stars stretched endlessly above, and the wind carried the scent of dry grass and earth. "You've taught me a lot," she said quietly. "About this place, about humans, about myself." Calder smiled. "And you've taught me something too. You remind me that people can always grow, always learn, always change. That's why the frontier works. We learn from it and from each other." Alara felt a deep warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never imagined. The fear of disappointment, of unfulfilled expectations, was still there, but it was quieter now, overshadowed by the quiet power of connection. The next morning, as the suns rose over the plains, Alara walked through the fields alone for a moment. She paused to watch a young animal learning to follow the herd, clumsy and uncertain. A smile tugged at her lips. She had been like that animal once, unsure of her place, cautious and tentative. But here, with Calder and the community, she was learning to find her rhythm, to take her place in a world that valued care, effort, and understanding. When she returned to the homestead, Calder greeted her with a small, hand-carved wooden bowl filled with fresh fruit and nuts. "For breakfast," he said, his eyes warm, "and for the start of a new day." Alara accepted it, feeling the gesture more deeply than she expected. It was not just food, it was care, thoughtfulness, and respect. She realized that these small acts, repeated over days and weeks, were the foundation of a life worth living. They were the proof of what humans could accomplish when they worked together, when they acted with kindness and intention. Throughout the day, as she tended the garden and guided the herd, Alara felt a growing sense of confidence and purpose. She was no longer merely a visitor or a temporary resident. She was part of something larger, something alive and human. And though she still had fears and doubts, she felt ready to face them, step by step. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of crimson and violet, Calder and Alara sat together on the porch, drinking tea and watching the twin moons rise. "I never thought I could feel this way," Alara said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Calder looked at her, his expression unreadable but kind. "Feel what?" "Connected and hopeful," she admitted. "I came here expecting nothing, and now I feel like maybe I can have something. Maybe even someone." Calder reached for her hand, holding it gently. "You can," he said simply. "You just have to let it grow like everything else on this planet, one step at a time." Alara nodded, her heart full. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she was beginning to understand that she could face it, not alone, but with someone by her side, someone who valued care, effort, and connection as much as she did. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for life, for love, and for the quiet, enduring strength of humanity. Alara woke to the soft light of Praxis 9 filtering through her window. The twin suns were just rising, casting warm orange rays across the plains. She stretched, feeling a quiet anticipation in her chest. Today, she would work with Calder and the other settlers, tending the fields and helping the animals, but there was something different in her steps. She no longer felt like a visitor or a newcomer. Praxis 9 had begun to feel like home. Downstairs, Calder was already preparing breakfast, the aroma of freshly baked bread and brewed herbal tea filling the small kitchen. He looked up and smiled as she entered. "Good morning," he said. "Ready for another day?" "Yes," Alara replied, returning the smile. "I think I'm ready to do more today to really help." Calder handed her a plate, and they ate together in comfortable silence. Each bite, each shared glance, carried the unspoken understanding of their growing bond. The frontier had taught them both patience and observation, and now it was teaching them something deeper: connection, trust, and perhaps even love. After breakfast, Calder led her to the northern pastures, where a small group of settlers was preparing the land for the next season of planting. Alara joined them eagerly, carrying water, arranging tools, and learning the subtle ways to read the soil and plants. The settlers welcomed her guidance, laughing at her mistakes and celebrating her successes. Mara came over at one point, handing Alara a bundle of herbs. "You're learning fast," Mara said, smiling. "The land responds to care, and so do people." Alara nodded, feeling warmth spread in her chest. She realized that Calder was right. The frontier was a place of learning, not just about survival, but about life, humanity, and belonging. Every action mattered, and every effort contributed to the whole. It was human ingenuity at its finest: patience, empathy, and careful attention. As the sun climbed higher, a sudden gust of wind swept across the plains, sending dust swirling in small whirlwinds. Calder called out, "Secure the water lines." Settlers rushed to adjust hoses and secure equipment. Alara ran alongside Calder, working with precision, her hands steady despite the chaos. For the first time, she felt a deep pride, not just in completing the task, but in her ability to contribute. She was part of this community, part of this land, and part of something larger than herself. And Calder was there, guiding her, supporting her, without ever taking over. After the work was done, Calder suggested a break. They walked to a small ridge overlooking the plains. The wind was cool, and the twin suns bathed the landscape in golden light. "You've changed a lot since you arrived," Calder said quietly. Alara looked at him, unsure how to respond. I think so," she admitted. "I came here expecting nothing. I didn't think I'd feel anything." "Feelings can be tricky," Calder said, his gaze steady. "They arrive when you least expect them, but that's not a bad thing." Alara sighed softly. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, walls to protect herself from disappointment. But now, with Calder, she felt those walls beginning to crumble. She wanted to trust him, to rely on him, but fear still whispered in the back of her mind. Later, as the settlers gathered for the evening meal, a small festival unfolded in celebration of the harvest. Lights twinkled along the fences, and music filled the air, created by the settlers themselves. Children ran and laughed, while adults shared stories of life on Praxis 9. Calder guided Alara to a quiet spot near the edge of the gathering. "I wanted to talk to you," he said softly. "About us." Alara's heart skipped. She had expected this conversation, yet the reality of it made her nervous. "Us," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Calder said, taking her hand gently. "I didn't bring you here out of necessity. I wanted someone to share this life with. Someone who sees the land, the animals, and the people the way I do. Someone I can respect, care for, and maybe even love." Alara felt a warmth bloom in her chest. She had expected practicality, a routine life, perhaps friendship. But not this: honesty, patience, and the possibility of love. She looked away, focusing on the horizon, unsure of what to say. "You don't have to answer now," Calder continued. "I just want you to know. You have a choice: to stay, to leave, or to define our future together. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it." Alara turned to him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She wanted to respond, but the words felt heavy, uncertain. She was afraid to hope, afraid to feel, afraid of being wrong. Yet beneath that fear there was a spark of courage she had not known she possessed. I need time, she whispered. Calder nodded. Take all the time you need, I'll be here. The night passed with quiet comfort. Alara lay awake, staring at the twin moons through her window. She thought of her life on the core world, the crowded streets, the cold apartments, and the endless routines. She had left that life expecting nothing, and yet here she had found something extraordinary, a chance to belong, a chance to contribute, a chance to feel. The following days were filled with work, laughter, and learning. Alara and Calder worked side by side, tending the crops, guiding the herd, and repairing structures. Their bond grew with each shared task, each quiet conversation, each gesture of care. One morning, while watering a patch of new seedlings, Alara paused to look out over the plains. The land stretched endlessly, alive with motion, color, and promise. She realized that she had begun to see herself not as an outsider, but as part of this world. She had found a place where her efforts mattered, where her presence was valued, and where her heart could begin to open. Calder joined her silently, handing her a small cup of tea. "You've grown a lot in these weeks," he said quietly. Alara smiled. "I feel different," she admitted. "I never thought I could belong somewhere like this." "You do," Calder said, his eyes warm. "You belong here with the land, with the people, and with me if you choose." Alara felt a surge of emotion. The walls she had built around her heart trembled, and for the first time she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be fully present, fully human, fully connected. That evening, the settlers gathered around a small fire, sharing stories of the day's work and their hopes for the future. Alara listened, feeling a deep sense of contentment. She had found a community that valued care, effort, and understanding, a place where humans thrived not through dominance, but through cooperation, empathy, and connection. Calder sat beside her, his hand brushing hers. "I'm glad you're here," he said softly. Alara looked at him, her heart full. "I'm glad too," she whispered. As the twin moons rose over the plains, casting silver light across the homestead, Alara realized something profound. She had traveled across the stars expecting nothing, but here, in the quiet of Praxis 9, she had found a home. Not just a house or a settlement, but a place where she belonged. A place where her heart could open, slowly and safely, to the possibility of love. The days that followed were filled with quiet joys. Alara learned the subtle ways of the frontier, the rhythms of the land, the behaviors of the herd, the needs of the crops. Each task she completed brought a sense of pride and accomplishment. Each shared moment with Calder deepened her understanding of trust, patience, and human connection. One evening, as they watched the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Calder turned to her with a small, hand-carved box. "For you," he said, "a gift. Not just for me, but for yourself, to remind you that you're part of this world and part of something bigger." Alara opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate charm, shaped like a small sun and moon intertwined. She traced its curves with her fingers, feeling the care and thought that went into its creation. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's yours," Calder replied, "for courage, for hope, and for the choices you'll make." Alara held it close, feeling a quiet strength settle within her. She no longer feared the unknown. She no longer doubted her ability to belong. And she no longer questioned the possibility of love, not just as an abstract concept, but as a living, breathing reality she could choose to embrace. As night fell and the stars stretched across the sky, Alara and Calder sat together in quiet companionship. The frontier was vast, challenging, and unpredictable, but it was also alive with possibility. And in that space between the land, the stars, and each other, they began to build a life worth living, a life filled with care, connection, and the quiet, enduring strength of humanity. For the first time, Alara understood the true meaning of home. It was not a place, nor a routine, nor an expectation. It was a connection, a choice, and a shared journey, and she was ready to embrace it fully, Alara woke to the soft warmth of Praxis Nine's twin suns spilling across her room. The light felt different now, gentle, inviting, alive. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a visitor or an intruder. She belonged. Slowly, she rose and dressed, feeling a sense of purpose in every movement. Today, she thought, she would face the choices before her. Downstairs, Calder was already tending to the small fire for breakfast. He glanced up, smiling as she entered. "Good morning," he said. "You're up early." Alara returned the smile, feeling a quiet courage settle in her chest. "I wanted to think," she replied softly. "About everything," Calder nodded as if he understood perfectly. He poured her a cup of tea and handed it to her. "Take all the time you need," he said gently. "There's no rush." They ate together in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. It was full, warm, and full of unspoken understanding. Alara felt the weight of her past life. The crowded, impersonal cities, the constant noise, the sense of always being alone, begin to lift. Here on this wide frontier she had found something rare, a place and a person who valued her, respected her, and allowed her to grow. After breakfast, Calder led her to the northern pastures, where the herd animals grazed lazily. Settlers moved quietly among the fields, tending crops, adjusting water lines, and repairing fences. Alara felt a sense of harmony and rhythm she had never known. The land, the animals, the people, all moving together in a delicate balance. Calder turned to her. "Alara," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I want to know what you want, not what you think you should do or what you expect from yourself. What do you truly want?" Alara looked out over the plains, watching the copper-colored grass sway in the wind. She thought of the days and nights she had spent learning, working, and observing the frontier. She thought of the quiet kindness of Calder, the laughter of the settlers, and the subtle beauty of life on Praxis 9. "I want to belong," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just to this place, but to someone. I want to care and be cared for. I want this life with its challenges, its quiet joys, and with you." Calder's eyes softened and a small smile spread across his face. "Then we'll make it together," he said. "Step by step, day by day, we'll face challenges, celebrate successes, and grow together." The rest of the morning passed in quiet preparation for a community meeting. The settlers gathered in the central square, discussing plans for the coming months. Alara observed how humans thrived in this frontier life, not through power or force, but through cooperation, understanding, and shared responsibility. Every voice mattered, and every effort contributed to the whole. During the meeting, Calder occasionally glanced at her, silently encouraging her to participate. When an issue arose regarding irrigation, Alara stepped forward, sharing her thoughts on water flow and crop rotation. The settlers listened, nodding and incorporating her suggestions. For the first time, Alara felt the true impact of her presence. She was not just learning, she was contributing, shaping life on Praxis 9 with her knowledge, intuition, and care. After the meeting, Calder guided her to a quiet hill overlooking the plains. The twin suns were beginning to set, casting the land in deep golds and soft purples. "You've grown so much," he said quietly. "I knew you had the potential, but seeing it, it's remarkable." Alara smiled, feeling a warmth she could not contain. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You taught me patience, care, and how to trust. You made me see that I could belong." Calder reached for her hand, holding it gently. "And you remind me every day that humans are capable of so much. We can adapt, learn, and care. Not because we're stronger, but because we choose to be. That's the true meaning of this life. Our strength lies in connection, compassion, and persistence." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. For so long she had feared attachment, feared disappointment, feared hope. Yet here, under the vast skies of Praxis 9, she understood that love was not a threat. It was a choice, a gift, and a force that made life richer, fuller, and more meaningful. That night, the settlers held a small celebration in the square. Lanterns glowed softly, Music filled the air and laughter carried across the plains. Alara and Calder joined the circle, dancing lightly to the rhythm, their hands intertwined. Each step felt natural, each movement a quiet affirmation of trust and connection. During a quiet moment, Calder led her to the edge of the square. "Alara," he said softly, "you came here expecting nothing, and yet you've given me everything. Your presence, your care, your heart. I don't want to imagine life without you." Alara looked at him, her heart full. "I don't want to imagine life without you either," she whispered. "I choose this. I choose you. I choose this life." Calder smiled, relief and joy in his eyes. He held her close, not out of possession, but as a partner, a companion, and a friend. Together, they watched the twin moons rise, casting silver light across the plains and illuminating the quiet determination of humanity thriving on the frontier. The following days were filled with work and connection. Alara tended the crops, cared for the herd, and participated in planning for the colony's expansion. Calder guided her when necessary but allowed her to make decisions, teaching her that trust was reciprocal and that humans grew stronger together. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fencing with Calder, Alara paused to look out across the plains. The wind rustled the grass, carrying the scent of dry earth and wildflowers. The settlers moved purposefully among the fields, each action a testament to human ingenuity and care. Alara realized that humanity's strength was not in domination or technology, but in adaptability, empathy, and cooperation. Calder noticed her gaze. "You see it too, don't you?" he asked. Alara nodded. "I do. Humans aren't perfect, but we can build, nurture, and thrive. We create homes, communities, and bonds. That's what makes us strong." He smiled. "Exactly. That's what Praxis 9 shows us. It's not about controlling the land or each other. It's about understanding, working together, and caring. That's our legacy." As the twin suns set once more, Alara and Calder stood hand in hand on the porch of their homestead. The plain stretched endlessly before them, alive with motion, color, and promise. The frontier had tested them, taught them patience, and shown them the quiet power of humanity. Alara felt a deep sense of peace. She had traveled across the stars expecting nothing, but she had found everything: purpose, belonging, connection, and love. She had discovered that humans could thrive not just through strength, but through care, cooperation, and choice. "Thank you," she whispered to Calder, her voice full of emotion. "For what?" he asked gently. "For showing me life, love, and the meaning of home," she replied. Calder held her close, resting his forehead against hers. "You've shown me the same," he said. "And together, we'll continue to build something lasting here and wherever we go. One step at a time, one day at a time." As night fell and the stars stretched across the vast sky, Alara realized that home was not just a place, nor a routine, nor a contract. Home was connection, choice, and shared growth. It was the quiet strength of humanity thriving in harmony with the land, with others, and with oneself. Praxis 9 was no longer just a colony on a distant world. It was a testament to what humans could accomplish when they worked together, cared deeply, and chose love. And under the vast sky, with Calder by her side, Alara felt something she had never known before. A quiet, enduring happiness, the kind that comes from belonging truly and fully. The twin moons rose, casting silver light across the homestead, and Alara knew without doubt that she had finally found her place in the universe. Not by chance, not by convenience, but by choice. She chose life, she chose connection, she chose love. And in that choice, she had discovered the greatest strength of all, the strength of being fully, beautifully human.